Hi, Kristen. Thank you very much, Kristen. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and your attendance today as we speak to how CTV is driving growth for retail mobile apps. My name is Dan Tarek. I work for Mountain. I am the Director of OTT and CTV strategy here, and we are a CTV platform specifically that really centers around performance, making it unique in the field.
Cool. And my name is Larissa. I do product marketing at AppsFlyer, and really our bread and butter is all about mobile attribution and marketing analytics so that you can better optimize performance on mobile devices.
Okay, good. So today's key takeaway is pretty straightforward. What we're seeing right now is how, and what we're speaking to is how CTV is really positioning itself to be an additional channel for your app download campaigns, your CPIs and your CPDs, how they're reflected now in a way that's more conforming to your normal channels, what you've done in social and what you've done in search. Equally as viable, equally as trackable, and in a lot of ways more efficient than what you've done to date in order to get your apps downloaded. Just to speak to the agenda, one, we're going to start a little bit with why you'd have an app in the first place, right? And why you're using it, how your customers are using that today. Then we can speak to not just how we can target your audience, but how that audience is really reflective of the true core of the customer that you're trying to reach, that's going to find more value in your application, that's going to find more use in it, and it's going to create a better overall experience for them. And then finally, we'll speak to how it's trackable. Trackable in the same way your social and your search are trackable, even though you can't physically click on the ad. So, retail apps are big business, right? And this is just speaking to why we have apps in the first place. But I really want to draw your attention to two of these numbers here. One, 57% of the shoppers are using retailer apps or using your mobile apps in your stores, in your brick and mortar stores right now, in your competitors' brick and mortar stores. And the second number I really want to draw your attention to is the overall growth, 55% year-over-year growth. What consumers are realizing, and what you already know, is that apps are being developed not just as an extension of your e-commerce store anymore, but really their own experience within that brick and mortar space, right? If you walk into Zales today, or if you walk into Jared or Kay Jewelers, you'll be able to use your application, not just to already have your wish list represented, but also, what you've purchased before, big holidays. You're letting that organization understand why you may be present so they can better help you. They're going to be able to deliver a better experience to you as a consumer when you have that app on your phone. And because of that, you're more and more likely to download that application in the first place, even before you walk into the store. Now, it goes well beyond, large retailers or brand names you've heard of. I mean, I've got an application right now for my local wine bar because I know that, one, I'm going to be able to have tasting notes, at that wine bar already loaded. And two, I'm going to be able to put myself on a wait list, make reservation, and make sure I get a table. So I have more and more apps, but most of the apps that I have on my phone are to increase and better the experience that I have when I walk into that store. So are your customers. And that's the importance of having an app right now, right? There is that connection between downloading that app and creating that better experience. And that's generally what your customers are looking for. Now, when we talk about downloading that app using connected television, or a campaign about the app download using connected television, I think it's important to start a little bit with what CTV is and how that stacks up to some traditional methodologies. I want to differentiate CTV and OTT. And you've probably heard a lot of CTV, OTT, addressable, all these different methodologies for really serving ads that tell a larger brand story. Right? OTT is over-the-top content. That's any content that you can access outside of a closed system. So outside of a cable package, outside of a satellite package, outside of a subscription in that manner, can you get that content, right? Streaming services as a whole. That's OTT. What connected television is more related to the device to access that OTT content. So CTV being your Rokus that you got your parents 3 years ago that they still haven't set up, your Apple TVs, your smart TVs, those are connected television devices that allow you to get into that OTT content. The advantage to CTV it's extraordinarily trackable. And it's very targeted as far as your audience is concerned. And we'll speak to that in a moment. But beyond that, you can see here how really CTV is taking off and how it's eclipsing linear as cord cutters increase, right? As we see more and more cord cutters and cord nevers, and linear loses some ground as far as reach is concerned, as far as efficacy is concerned. We see CTV picking up that slack, gaining more and more momentum from users that just want to access certain networks through their devices as a whole. So when you compare it to linear, you really see the advantage in starting to invest in CTV now, both for any kind of advertising, but specifically right now for app download campaigns. The other big advantage to CTV over linear, over a lot of channels, is your audience. That's the big headline right here. And you're going to be able to address them very specifically in a very niche way with connected television. We can go beyond a demographic. We don't have to purchase a program and hope that 8% of that program fits the gender and age range that you're looking to touch. We can now grab audiences of users that are in market today for your product set, that have an affinity for your brand, that have an affinity for your competitor's brand. And we can speak to them directly. So there's no wasted impression at this point in time. We're not speaking to, 1 million people and hoping that 80,000 of them are the correct ones. Now we're speaking to 500,000 people, knowing all 500,000 of them are exactly who are going to be interested in your product and your app and look to be putting it on their phone. Targeting more like never before, and this is just what I was speaking to currently. Now, at Mountain, we use Oracle for third-party data integration on that end. And it's everybody under the Oracle umbrella, right? We have a unique integration where Oracle hands us IP addresses, no cookies, no device IDs. We're not dependent on those in order to be able to serve, or really in order to be able to track. We're looking at IP addresses. So as your social may have been waning, as your search may have been waning over the past couple of months based on iOS 14 updates, we're not seeing that degradation in our performance. We're holding strong there. So when we talk about profitable prospecting, when we talk about profitable app download campaigns, that's still open to us on a CTV level. So it's not just superior to linear targeting. In a lot of ways, it's getting superior to your social targeting as well. Bringing retail to the customer as a whole. And this is really speaking to kind of the impact that you're going to be able to get from a connected television ad versus a display ad. Even if it's a 6-second video, you've now got 15 or 30 seconds to be able to tell your entire brand story. And you're not telling it in a space where I'm going to scroll down and see another ad. We're telling it in a space with a dedicated amount of time on an unskippable ad, on a fully episodic program that your customers are already using as a trusted source, right? They're familiar with commercials to this point, and they know the information that they're going to get from them, and it tends to create a lot more impact. So we're showing these commercials during their favorite programming when they're a little bit more susceptible to to influence by that commercial as a whole. And we're doing it when their phone is in their hand, right? And that's the big thing about mobile app download. We're targeting the users that you want as they're watching a television program, and then they get to make the choice to go to their phone, go to their smart device, and download that app. Actively go to a Play Store or their Apple phone and actively download the application as a whole. What does this mean? This means the downloads that you get from connected television are much more likely to stick. You're not going to see somebody fat thumb their way to the app as a whole. Nobody's downloading in order to get some kind of perk and then dropping your app or deleting your app after a week because they never really intended on using it. This is someone that was interested in your product. We're showing that within the audience that we've selected beforehand, and then they're showing that within the action that they're taking to download that app. And they want that experience from you. It just shows a more qualified download and a higher affinity for the folks that we're targeting to actually download in the first place. And that speaks to this last piece. They're ready to convert. 95% of consumers have a mobile device in their hand as they're watching TV. And that's just what we were saying before. They're ready to download that app, and when they do, it's with a very great intent. Lastly, standing out from the crowd. I don't know about you, but today, I see a lot of commercials. I watch Hulu, and we see the commercials there, and we see a lot of commercials for CPG brands. We see a lot of commercials for auto brands, etc. But when I get a commercial that's asking me to take a specific action to that point in time, at that point in time, it rings a little bit more directly messaged towards me at that point. We're really you're able to stand out in a crowd right now. You're not just showing your wares. You're speaking to the end consumer and you're asking them, hey, if you would like a stronger relationship with us and a better experience, please download that app. And in that way, you cut through the noise of the remainder of the television commercials they're going to see while they're watching This Is Us on Hulu. That's how you're standing out in that crowd. That's how you can grab the attention of the consumer as a whole. I hope that's helpful. And that just kind of sets up how we're using connected television. But I'm going to hand it over to Larissa to speak to how we're measuring that, right? Our unique integration with AppsFlyer is helping us measure like you haven't been able to before.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think really, just to reiterate the point, I think something that's really special about CTV is that you're able to get really specific, tangible, outcome-based performance. You're not just looking at a lift analysis that might be quite fuzzy based on, city level data. And it's not just looking at ratio and frequency. It's really looking at what are people doing on their mobile devices, on their web devices that can be directly attributed to a connected television ad. So over the next couple slides, I'm just going to walk you through how this process works in terms of what Mountain is able to do and what data we pass to them. Yeah, cool. So this kind of diagram really just shows in 3 parts kind of what that process looks like and how we're actually able to do that. So the first step is really about data collection. So at AppsFlyer, I mentioned earlier, we do mobile attribution, and really what we mainly focus on, we do measure other devices as well, which I won't get into, but what we mainly focus on is really understanding what are all the different things that people are exposed to on mobile from paid and owned media, and then what causes them to install and take later actions. So we're actually passing that exposure and install data to Mountain. At the same time, Mountain is going to be collecting that ad view data from the CTV ads that Mountain is running. And you also have the option of collecting data from any of your other relevant partners. So for example, Google Analytics, looking at the same thing on a web. The next step is really about how do we actually make sense of that data? And so what Mountain is doing is essentially trying to look at all the different devices that are in kind of that set of data and trying to understand which of those devices fall into the same household. For example, which of them share the same Wi-Fi address, which of them share the same IP. And using that data, they can then say, okay, we know that these are part of the same household. We have the timestamps from all the exposure data and all of that install and conversion data. And we can confidently say that these particular users took an action because they saw a CTV ad. Then that last step is really about delivering that information to you, which you're able to analyze easily in Mountain's dashboard. So that's kind of high level how we work together to kind of provide that cross-device graph. What I want to kind of focus on next is what you then do with that data to optimize further. So at AppsFlyer, really what we're trying to show you is kind of what's that full journey specifically that gets people into your mobile app. And there's two main advantages of working with an MMP like us. And really the first part is about better understanding what's bringing people into your app and what that full journey is that actually caused them to convert. And the second piece is really about diving deeper, right? Making sure that you're not just optimizing towards maybe a media partner that drives a lot of installs, but you're actually optimizing towards marketing efforts that are driving tangible outcomes, like users that are making purchases, that are taking actions. So if you go to the next slide, I'll just kind of break each of those halves into kind of real examples. So again, the first part is about marketing exposure. This is what we call multi-touch attribution, which is essentially taking all the different things that someone was exposed to and sequencing them in order. So in this case, someone saw a Roku ad, and then maybe they saw an ad from Forbes on their web, their desktop, and then maybe they had to see a few more ads. And then finally they saw a Google ad and they decided, okay, like I want to click on this. I've already been seeing these running shoes. I need to find out more. I'm ready to install this app and engage with it. There's a few different advantages of why this type of insight is helpful. I think the first is really being able to optimize your media efforts. There is going to be a difference between channels that are really good at converting, causing someone to click, for example, and channels like CTV, a bigger screen, where it's really about driving intent and driving kind of that initial consideration. And that's going to allow you to understand how to use different media and also how you might want to tell your story differently across each of these devices, right? The way that you're actually speaking to people might change over time. The other kind of advantage of having multi-touch attribution is actually really about cost savings. So to get a little bit technical for a moment, in the world of mobile, some of you might know this, a lot of times campaigns are actually bought on a cost per install basis. And what that means is that you'd be paying Facebook, for example, on the last click that led that person to install the app. The problem is if you're not working with a source of truth, kind of a third-party provider to stitch all those actions in sequence, you might have actually multiple ad networks saying, hey, I saw that I served this person a click and I saw that they installed, I must get credit, right? So you could actually be double counting. And on average, we actually see that around 13% of installs globally are claimed by multiple networks. So you're potentially saving 13% of your total budget by having this visibility. It is important to note here as we're looking at this flow, when you think about the functionality of what we do versus Mountain, really what we're stitching together is web, mobile, owned media data. We're getting kind of that insight on the TV side of things from Mountain. So it's really that partnership that makes this all work as a holistic picture. So that said, the next slide is really about optimizing towards what people are doing within the app, right? So we just understood, what causes them to actually install and become a customer. Now you want to figure out, okay, what media sources are driving my most valuable customers and what can I do to actually keep people within my app and get them coming back and spending more? So in this example, let's say that Google led to the install. Someone might, browse a little bit, maybe add a few different options to their cart, but people get distracted, can't decide, so you leave the app, right? Very common behavior. As a marketer, you might then decide, okay, you know what? I saw that this person showed some intent by adding something to their cart. I'm going to send them an email reminding them to complete that purchase. And if all goes well, it works, right? And they get a purchase. So that's just one example of something you can do. I think remarketing can be an extremely effective vehicle as a complement to whatever you're doing on the acquisition side to really make sure that people stay engaged, they don't forget about your brand, and they keep coming back. But I think the bigger value here is really being able to dive deep into any sort of in-app action that you'd like. So there's really no limit on how many in-app events you can set up. It's not just add to cart and purchase. You can measure logins or signups for loyalty programs, or maybe someone that used a promo code, even things like clicking on certain categories of search. And with all that data, what you're really getting is a much richer understanding of how people are engaging with your app, what they're doing. And importantly, we're actually able to measure the revenue side of things as well, so that you can actually optimize towards true return on ad spend, true lifetime value, and make sure that you're actually optimizing towards business results and not just vanity metrics. So that in a nutshell is kind of how all of these things work together to really allow you to make sure that whatever you're doing on CTV, mobile, or your other channels is leading to high quality users and is really improving that customer experience within mobile.
All right. Thank you, Larissa. I think just to put a cap on today and just recap a little bit of what we spoke to, retail apps are big business. That you already know, right? But connected television can help you find your customer in a unique way, in a place where they're more likely to install, and if they do install, keep that application over time. You know, folks that are going to use it are the ones that are seeing the commercials, and it's going to impact their experience. And that's really what you're getting with connected television. And now with our integration with AppsFlyer, we're able to track that in a way that you've done in a digital methodology with all of your other channels to really compare it apples to apples as far as efficacy is concerned. That's it from our side, folks. From here, we'll turn it back over to Kristen.